everyone. Welcome to our first of the year Women's Spotlight. I am so happy to kick off 2025 with this wonderfully inspiring woman, Amanda Darcangelo. She has been an advocate running through life, making sure that data and cybersecurity and AI is being represented by ladies, well, at home, gardening, in the kitchen, kneading, and also creating forums for others. She's a women tech speaker, and she has been for a couple of years, as well as in 2024, served on the jury to help pick the top person in AI. So we're really lucky to have her here with us today as we dig into some of her insights in how we can bring our best selves to work every day, create the life that we want, and be fully expressed and play full out. Amanda, thank you for joining us and being so patient while we set this up. It is probably one of the longest in the making, but I'm sure going to be the best to kick off this new year.
Thank you so much for having me. I was more than happy to wait. It's an honor to be able to join you, and I'm really excited to have a good conversation with you.
Well, I'm sure everyone's excited to hear all the great things that you're up to. With over a decade in the business and working with CTI to bring your data expertise and your senior analytics and data to the forefront of your work, it's an amazing place to be. But also, I love the fact that you focus a lot on like municipalities and healthcare and government bodies, helping those that don't always have the funding to do what they need to do with data work, make that more actionable and make that a reality. But I always love to start with, how did it all begin? Your love for data, your love for analytics, your love for AI. So if you could take us back and tell us, how'd your journey start when you were a little girl? Did you know you wanted to play with data?
Um, Not really. I have an engineer for a father. My dad is one of the driving forces in my life. And when I was little, he would have us keep Excel spreadsheets of different things that we did in our lives. If we had a problem or if we wanted to improve something, he'd say, just track it, keep an eye on it. And so that became a little bit of a habit. But realistically, where I started getting into data was it in college. So I went to SUNY Buffalo. I had these really amazing professors, Professor Beck and Professor Yakabuchi, and I was a political science major, and they really focused our political science program on the statistics. So global trending and how do you change policy and what are the impacts of different outcomes across the world. And so we started learning the impacts of different statistical methods. We had to build data sets for our theses. And that's really where I understood that political science was cool, but what I really enjoyed was the act of creation of new knowledge that you get out of data analysis.
Wow, that's amazing. I also studied poli-sci. Do you feel that because you've done some work in the municipalities, especially before joining CTI Data, that you were kind of using some of that love for politics as well?
Absolutely. I think, again, the program was so focused not necessarily on politics itself, but the act of creating good policy that can impact the world. And there was just this intrinsic drive that kind of spurred in me to help do good. And so working with the city of Syracuse allowed me to start driving the city into a more structured, data focused organization. The innovation department had been established for a long time with some amazing founders, and being able to carry on that for a short period of time, but with some impact, especially around the surveillance policies with the city of Syracuse. The important work is something that really drives me forward as I continue to work in some municipalities, but also healthcare and higher education.
All right. Well, I'm going to continue to dig into the Syracuse just a little bit more because As someone who spent a ton of time working in data analytics in the public space, it's always really difficult because of funding. Some of just many departments still are on paper. Trying to bring everyone together and get them on a unified platform and using data to make evidence-based decisions can be really difficult. Tell me a little bit about how your journey went and some of the outcomes you were able to achieve and how.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things um that we continue to that the API department continues to work through, but that we started when I was at the organization. We have Syracuse is not a large city. We are also a Rust Belt city. We have some crumbling infrastructure, and the city does its best to really support and continue to maintain that. One of the issues that we often run into is um, walkability. We have crumbling sidewalks that need to be maintained, and because we're such a snowy city, they deteriorate a lot faster than they would in other cities. So one of the projects that I got to work on was this really interesting understanding of all of the different sidewalk structure around the city, understanding the level of quality of that sidewalk, and then being able to actually move forward and identify those that would benefit the public the most to be fixed. And so it sounds like a silly thing, but sidewalks are really something that they allow communities to exist together as opposed to individually in homes or apartments. They allow people to get out and experience their community. So what we did was we used some GIS mapping. We, measured all the sidewalks across the city, and were able to, like I said, identify the amount of deterioration, identify where most walking is happening and where most walking should be happening, and then be able to actually deploy departments to go and install new sidewalks. Some had to be widened to be ADA compliant to ensure that all individuals within the communities can actually go and enjoy the community itself. So that was really one of the more important things I think I did while I was there. That was really exciting.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think that data can help you make better sidewalks, which in turn improves the health of your citizens. So that interconnectability and being a Canadian, snow, yeah, breaks down those roads and sidewalks. I'll tell you, I know that way too well. So how has your data journey transformed, like moving from the city into CTI? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so my data journey, especially, from college, has kind of been jumping around. I've worked at a lot of different organizations up until CTI Data. I'd never really stayed with an organization too long. I'll get into that in a minute, but what I found is that by going through all these different organizations, I was able to really get the experience that I needed to build my data capabilities. So at the outset, I was really, focused on data analysis and just doing um, Excel spreadsheets or working through some statistical analysis tools like R and Python, but really just focusing on that analysis. Whereas as I moved between positions, I got more into the data engineering aspects. And then I got talking about data governance and really understanding the impacts that data governance has on your overall data solution and your capabilities to make good decisions, not just decisions.
Mm.
Um, so as I moved from the city into this consulting role, one of the reasons that really drove that was the ability to impact more. So while I was with Syracuse, obviously I got to impact policy and I got to impact the citizens of Syracuse. But while I'm here at CTI, I have the opportunity to bring the capabilities of data to even more organizations, which then allows them to widen their data capabilities, to bring on more data individuals, to expand the scope of what they're doing with their information. ultimately data is a way to get time back. And so they're giving their employees their time back to do more important things, to do things on their own, have more free time. So I find that really important in the way that I get to impact these organizations now.
So you feel that you're of more impact, you can see the tangible effort and the reward, and you're seeing people are making smarter, evidence-based decisions with the work that you're doing. Tell me about the culture where you work. If this is the longest place you've been, there's always a reason why, you know, we always talk about our why. Why stay? What have they done?
Yeah, honestly, the best work culture I've been in, period, which is why I've stayed. We work remotely, but we're not a fully remote company. It is hybrid, so you can go into the office if you'd like. We do have people who go in the office every day and they really enjoy that. They have, a group of people that go in every day, they get lunch together, they enjoy having that social time during the day. Other people go in a couple times a week, once a month. Or myself, I live further away from the office. And one of the things that has really been beneficial about the ability to work remotely with CTI um, is to be able to have the types of opportunities that I might in a larger city while also being close to my family. When I graduated college, one of my first jobs was at another consulting firm, but it took me to New Hampshire. And so being away from my family, I'm a homebody. I really like spending time with my family. So having the opportunity to do that and still have a high impact position is one of the things that really has kept me here at CTI. Beyond that, the my coworkers are empathetic. We have It doesn't feel isolated. We are on conversations with each other every single day. We make sure to keep each other in the loop on things. We collaborate again daily. So having that culture that is both remote but also feels close is something that the company has really nurtured well.
Right. And in your company, is there a lot of diversity of cultures, people, genders? And if so, how do they foster it if they do?
I will say that, especially as far as gender goes, we are working towards it. Um, and I know that we're working towards it because I get to be involved a lot in the recruiting process. I'm involved in interviews, especially with college recruiting, making sure that um, our our applications and our job descriptions are as equitable as possible. We always make sure that there's disclaimers on those job descriptions that say, if you don't feel qualified for this, but you have some of the qualifications, maybe you're not 100% sure, apply anyways. We all know that women are likely to apply for a job that they feel almost 100% qualified for, whereas men are more likely to apply for positions that they're 60 to 70% qualified for. And so making sure that that type of language is in our job descriptions is how we're starting to expand our gender equity at the company. I will say, even since I've joined, it has improved significantly. So when I joined, it was myself and one other woman on our data team. I believe now we're a small team in general. Our data team has about 40 people on it, and I believe we're at between 8 and 10 women now, and continuing to drive that gender equity within our organization.
That's wonderful to hear. And what a great accomplishment to achieve that many qualified data experts that are also female in the mix. Now, obviously, it's not always easy to be a female in data. So, has there ever been a place, and you don't need to disclose where it was, but has there ever been a place where you didn't feel that the organization was embracing equity in the same way that your current organization is?
Absolutely. And I won't call out any organization specifically, but there is a culture within technology and within data that is very male dominated. And the expectation is that if you're a woman on the team, you don't talk very much because your ideas aren't as good. And so you should just, sit there, maybe take some notes, but we're going to come up with the ideas as men, and then you can do some coding.
Mhm.
And I'm sure a that's not something that is unfamiliar to other women listening to the podcast.
Mhm.
It's so easy to fall into that trope of, hey, Amanda, could you take notes every meeting? Or,
Right.
hey, Amanda, could you do QA because everyone else is busy coding? I
Mhm.
have coding to do too.
Mhm.
So there's that culture in tech and that assumption that women are going to be kind of and and it comes to something that you and I were talking about before this, where women are nurturing and empathetic. It is this idea that the women in tech are going to be the moms. They're going to clean up after everyone else has done the work. And that's just it's not the case. We have so many amazing ideas because we have those empathetic, notions within our lives. We come up with these ideas that are above and beyond things that other people can identify. And the different perspective is just going to make your products better. And unfortunately, I think in a lot of cultures, that's not acknowledged.
Yeah, I will agree with you. And I don't believe it's conscious. Like, I don't believe males are conscious to it when they speak over you in a meeting. When you say something and someone else says the exact same thing and they're male and they're like, great idea. When they leave you with the work that no one really wants to do, I think it unfolds based on what they've been trained, taught, and what they've seen. So, as women, we do need to gently educate them as we're stepping into our feminine power in the workplace. What I mean by that is, I've also seen many women struggle with bringing that nurturing, caring side of themselves because they're constantly faced with being the one to clean up or the one who takes the sloth jobs or the jobs that no one wants, right? So how do you, and I know you've done some great work, like you've co-founded Salt Lake City Community to help bring more women and break down the barriers of women in data. You work with women tech, and we'll talk about all of that momentarily. But in the workplace, when you're on the ground, as I love to call it, how do you ensure that you are educating the people who are doing this and trying to convert them, or do you convert them to allies? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think there are there are a few things that I have done throughout my career um that really buck the notion that femininity doesn't belong in tech. So, especially when I was starting my career out, I am working remotely now, so this is not not a habit I continue to maintain. But when I was working in the office, I wore heels to work every day. I wore skirts, I wore tights, I wore dresses. I made sure that my hair looked nice because I really enjoy doing that. And just because that's going to be perceived as more feminine and potentially have people look at me a different way is not a reason for me to stop being who I am authentically. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and one of the other things that I've always made sure to do is speak up. There's no reason you were getting to this a little bit before about how it's not conscious, but there is very little filter on men when they have ideas in the workplace. That should be the same for women. If you have an
Absolutely.
idea, work is for brainstorming, particularly when you're at the collaboration point, you're brainstorming. If you have an idea, throw it in the pool. It's okay if it's not a good idea. Just raise your hand and raise your voice. And continuing to do that and continuing to prove again and again that you are smart, that you have good ideas, that you know what you're doing is unfortunately sometimes the way that you have to win people over. That's the way that you have to prove to them that you're a functional person in the workplace. You're not just there as, you're not just there to fill seats. You're not there as an equity hire. You're there because you are good at your job.
Absolutely, Amanda. And that's so important. I find from the hundreds and hundreds of women that I've spoken to in this work over the last couple of decades, including myself, oftentimes as a woman, you're felt that you must contort and conform yourself to the perception of others in order to advance your career. And because those who've come before in leadership are generally males, what we have as our beacon to follow is a masculine footprint. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I break it down to masculine and feminine energy because masculine energy is more competitive. They want to go out there and you want to hit goals. There's times when we need that. But there's certainly times where we need to be empathetic and collaborative and nurturing, and we want to look pretty or soft or feminine or maybe not. But being able to truly express yourself and be in alignment with your core values is going to be your greatest gift that you bring to the table. What I've also found is when you're not doing that, when you're not being authentic and in alignment with who you are, when you are scared to speak up, when you do false represent yourself in the boardroom, that's when burnout really happens, because having to carry all of that can be exhausting. Have you ever felt that way, like when before you found your voice, that it was exhausting?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, having to continually ensure that you are making the right decision that is not authentically you. You're making a decision based on other people's needs, other people's perceptions. It's exhausting. This one organization that I worked at, um, this was not necessarily an equity issue. They were just a strict and antiquated culture in general. But they had a policy that you couldn't dye your hair. And that sounds really silly, but I like to dye my hair. It's not dyed right now, but usually it's blue or bright yellow or red or something. And
So
um,
fun.
yeah, and it's just a whimsical way to bring color into your life. And it sounds silly, oh, you're not allowed to dye your hair at work, so just don't dye your hair at work. But having to morph your personal self to be your work self, it just that type of culture shows an underlying issue of rigidity that is completely unnecessary. And again, walking on those eggshells, it just drains you over time in a way that excessive work does not. So, if you're in a good work culture, even if you're working a lot of overtime, you don't get that same type of brain drain and exhaustion because it's a different type of code switching almost that you have to do every single moment of every single day.
Yes, and you spoke about your dad earlier. My dad is also my hero, and he works even now 6, 7 days a week. He's built this company from the ground up with his own hands. And I always tell him, Dad, like just working every day, like maybe just take a break. And he always says to me, Tara, it's not work if you love what you do. And I found that too. Like I had a stroke when I hit 40, for example, and I remember I know it's impactful, right? Like, well, that sounds really scary. And part of it was, but I remember like lying in my bed when I could function again. And I wanted to work. Like I missed like what's happening with my customers. How are my clients doing? What new, data outputs and KPIs did they build today? And especially when you can connect your work with impact. And I think that's the thing that working in data, we don't always talk about enough, right? Being able to leverage data to make differences like those sidewalks, or like the police finding that missing child quicker, or that, healthcare professional being able to more accurately diagnose illness. Like that's life changing, and that's the work we do. So how do we, love what we do, but still overcome these things as they arise? So I love the way you kind of have made a difference in your current organization, and you're making difference out there. But as ourselves, sometimes we do have to be rigid and structured at work, and especially. How do you balance it when you get home? You talked a little bit about being a homebody. Tell us more about how you use that creative side of yourself.
Yeah. So I think that it's important to have that balance. We, as data professionals, spend all our time in front of a computer, and we work on such mentally exhausted and taxing work all day. And it may be a regular 8-hour workday, it may be a 10-hour workday or a 12-hour workday, depending on what you do and how long you have to commit to your position. But it's so important to then step away and do something. I find it really helpful to do something with my hands. So like you said, I'm a homebody. I like to garden. I like to cook in the kitchen. I am a knitter, so I'll sit and knit something, but it just the act of physically making something instead of mentally making something really helps balance out the mental strain of the day. And I think as data professionals, you have to be so creative in the work that you do. It's important to bring that creativity into other elements of your life. So, not just focusing continuously on what's the next problem I have to solve? What's a weird way that I can figure out a loophole to this issue I've been working on? You need to then step away and really breathe that creativity into something else. And that'll help you be better at the work that you do because you'll have that different perspective. You'll have that moment that you stepped away and come back with a bit of a clean slate and be able to rethink through an issue.
I think it just helps you be a more fully expressed human. It certainly helps prevent burnout. It is amazing when we look at the stats. Yes, more women are entering the tech space. We have more female C-level, C-suite than ever before. However, we have an extremely high amount that leave the tech space after they hit those levels. They don't stay. And I think it was like 38% I had seen the other day. But regardless, it is a alarming amount. And I tie that to not being able to have that balance, to being not being able to be authentic in alignment with themselves, to not show up and express themselves. Because as I said, that's a lot scary. And then being, coming home and being in the other side and just being able to feel to sort of let all of yourself out, I think really does make a difference to prevent burnout. The other thing we talked about is this women in tech, and I love it because it's a global forum and there's so many amazing women. So shout out to Women Tech at the global organization. I know you've been a speaker there and you've been involved for the last couple of years, as have I. Tell me what you love about it.
I think you really hit the nail on the head. It's a global organization, and because it's a global organization, you get these different perspectives that you never would consider yourself. You and I are both from, democratic countries. We're both from capitalist societies. Those change the perspective that you bring to the workplace, and especially with data that can become, again, it's a creative field, and the work that you do with data can become really creative. Seeing the perspectives of others from different countries, from different paths in life, and seeing what they want to do with data and the way that they take the same notions of creating new information, creating new knowledge, and drive it in all of these different directions. It's just something that I find really exciting. I was part of the Women Tech jury panel this year for the Global Awards, and one of the things that really inspired me as part of that jury panel was seeing all of the different things that women around the world are doing with data. They're creating companies that are helping their communities and helping society overall. They are continuing to build relationships and equity within their own companies. They're continuing to expand the capabilities that data has in supporting what people do, not necessarily replacing it and not necessarily overtaking what you want to do in your position, but they're, taking away the things that you don't want to do, the things that in your job are overwhelming or in your life are overwhelming and are unnecessary for us as humans to do. And I think the different perspectives of that and the different things that come out of the collaboration and community that Women Tech really brings together is why I love the organization so much.
Yeah, it's exactly why I love it too. So we have agreement on that. Now, AI, right? A lot of people out there, probably maybe some of your aunts or maybe your dad, I don't know, but I know in my circle, tons of people are worried. AI is taking over the world. We're not going to have any jobs left. The way you just explained it was beautiful, right? How elaborate on that? Empathy with AI? What does that look like? Using AI to take the mundane things off of my plate, but I still can be a creative genius. How does that work? Like, let's explore that a bit more for those out there that have a little fear or about the unknown of AI.
Absolutely. So I think that there are a lot of ways to quell people's fears about AI. Some of it is just additional information, and some of it is ensuring that we set up the correct infrastructure to develop AI that is supportive and not destructive. We've seen in the past, especially with silly Twitter chatbots and the almost publicity stunts that have come out of different organizations that are developing AI, we've seen things that easily get biased and easily get overtaken by the extremes of the internet and the extremes of data that's being collected and trained on them. And one of the things that I really advocate for is AI governance. Data governance in general is a really important aspect of your overall data platform. Governance is what allows you to make good data decisions, not just data decisions. And so moving that into AI involves creating standardization around ethics testing and bias testing. We see, especially as we talked about it with tech. Tech is a male-dominated field. If you train a model based on current data in tech, it is, say you're training a recommendation model for career paths. So you're creating a career path recommendation model. It is being trained by the data that is in the market right now. If all you're doing is training the raw data, it's going to recommend men join tech careers, and it's going to recommend that women don't.
Absolutely.
And and so one of the things that AI governance is intended to do is filter out that bias. Make sure that you're using variables that are actually going to be impactful, not your gender, but maybe your interests in math and science, or the hobbies that you have, or your grades in school, the colleges you want to go to. Those are all going to be the variables that are impactful, not your gender or your ethnicity or the socioeconomic background you grew up in. And I think that's where we really need to be strict about our AI usage, is how do we ensure that we're making the right decisions around what is being trained and we're not bringing this bias in. And there's fun little things that AI can do too. For example, there are some really great AI tools that recommend what I should have for dinner. I can put in what I have in my fridge, it'll pull out a recipe for me, come up with something, and often it tastes really good, and other times I'll get, AI word scramble, and then I don't use the recipe. Um, and that's another thing to keep an eye on is that AI word scramble. We need to make sure that we're being diligent about fact checking. You, as an individual, need to ensure that you're doing your due diligence in fact checking your AI, because you do get those instances in which it's coming up with responses based on what's across the internet, and the internet is often wrong. So there's a lot of ways that we can destigmatize AI, and I think you're right that it does start, around the dinner table with your aunts and your uncles and your dad, and as professionals in data, we can not only make a difference in the work that we do, but also make a difference in how that's perceived.
And I mean, it also, we talked about the older generations, right? And, for me, when I talk about equity, it is around everything, right? Every culture, gender, as well as this ageism that happens out in our community, right? So yes, we have to inform that population, but for the younger generation that's coming up, more and more women and girls are moving into data. I know that, when you co-founded Salt Lake City Community, part of what you wanted to do was bring that localized knowledge to the community and help take away some of that stigma, right? Have guest speakers, have breakdown and breakout sessions. So tell us a little bit about that and how that might appeal to someone that's younger moving into the industry.
Yeah, so Salt City Data Community, really the purpose and the reason that my friend Ashley and I founded this is to bring our data knowledge to people who may be hesitant to get into the industry, or may not have all of the background, may not understand what a data professional does. So we have speaker sessions, we have discussion sessions, we do annual arcs that focus on specific technologies, or like this year we had an arc that was all about people making great innovation. So these were change makers, and we had Dana from In Situ. She joined us, and In Situ is an organization who that is bringing virtual reality into the public development space. So as public works are working with private organizations to build new construction around large cities, you as the community get to interact more through virtual reality with the planning and construction, as opposed to just seeing, oh, hey, that's a new building in my neighborhood that's, blocking the sun, and now it's miserable walking down my street in the winter because it's cold and it's shady.
Right.
So being able to bring individuals like that, particularly, we've moved the majority of our meetings to virtual. So we started during COVID. Obviously, everyone moved to virtual, but we found that we were able to have such a wider reach. And now we have individuals joining us from across the country and even around the world, and being able to bring innovative solutions, being able to show people the tangible, functional way that data impacts their lives, allows them to not only better understand data, but better relate to it and more, how do I phrase this? Not feel as intimidated by it. Data can be a really intimidating thing, especially people talk about, terabytes of data and petabytes of data, and just the amount of data, and then the fact that it's being integrated into every aspect of our lives, it can be really intimidating. And so the purpose of the organization is really to lessen that intimidation and make it feel as though it's something that's really approachable for anyone who wants to get involved.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, you keep yourself very busy and you're doing some wonderful work and, participating in the global platform of women in tech, creating a localized chapter that now it sounds like is expanding and even having people from around the globe join as well. So that's amazing. And I want to just commend you on that work and being out there and making a difference every day, because that's our job as humans, right? Is to give back. And it sounds like you're doing that. Now, through your journey, can you think of any time in your life where you felt a little bit like, this is too tough. I don't want to do this in the data field anymore, or even just a struggle that you had to really pull yourself through with resilience, because many of our listeners, depending on the time, are going through something, have gone through something. They might be having a boss right now that they don't see eye to eye with. They may have just lost their career. All of these things can leave us feeling powerless sometimes. And as women, it's important we support each other. So how have you done it in those moments, if there has been something that comes to mind?
Absolutely. I mean, every day there's something that comes up where I'm just like, I would rather, shut all this down and maybe go open a bookstore or something. Or, there are so many career paths that are less aggressive, and I don't necessarily mean that in the way that we were speaking about earlier, but data is constantly moving. It's constantly there are new updates to data, new insights, new ways of doing things every single day. It's an exhausting field. It's something that you have to constantly maintain. So every day there's something that's like, I could just not do this anymore. And ultimately, I think one of the things that I come back to is reminders of why I really enjoy the work that I do. So, one of the things I like to say is that I solve puzzles for a living, and I really
Love
do.
that.
The work that I do means that I get to stretch my creativity. It means that I get to stretch my brain a lot. I get to learn new technologies. I get to learn new strategies around how to make people's lives better. And I get to make people's lives better. After seeing implementation of these projects, you can see people happier in the work that they're doing. You can see people having these, freed up time, not working extensive hours anymore, not working on the weekends when they should, when they're supposed to be home with their kids, or after work when they want to go out with their friends or do something else other than work. And so it's just reminding myself of the things that I really, really enjoy about the work that I do, that continues to push me through those times where it's exhausting and you're tired and you learned 5 new technologies because you have a client that needs them and wants you to figure something out that you're just like, you shouldn't be doing it that way, but you want it that way and I can't convince you it's not, and just those frustrating days. And it's just about reminding yourself, hey, I get to go into work and solve puzzles every day.
I love that. I love that reframe. And you're right. When I started in data, we talked about things like gigs. Yes, I've been in this data game for about 20 years. So, but I will tell you, when I think about petabytes and, things that data has just expanded so exponentially, and it will continue to do so. So being able to dissect it and break it down into puzzles, that sounds like a fun way to keep yourself on top of the game. Now, I wonder if you could go back and you could talk to that little girl inside of you. I believe we all have an inner child, and I think sometimes that 5, 6-year-old can step up to the plate and run our lives for us. But if you could go back and you could tell her something that would settle her, that would calm her, that would help her know the beauty of what you've created today, what would you say to her?
I think I would say stop stressing out so much about things. It is not important that you get the thing done today, which has been a struggle with me throughout my entire life, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's hobbies or work or whatever. I always feel like you have to get that thing done today, and it's not the case. It's not It is the case if you're maybe in healthcare or if you're in public safety or something like that. But as data professionals, we do not have lives on the table. It is okay to put something down on a Friday afternoon and pick it back up on Monday. It is okay to, it's okay to take that extra, week or couple of weeks to learn the new thing as opposed to trying to cram for it all at once. It's okay to not, graduate early and get your life started. You're allowed to sit back and enjoy things. And I think, that's what I would tell anyone else that is listening to the podcast, whether you're in data or not. It's okay to kind of just sit in yourself a little bit and enjoy what's happening in the moment, not necessarily be thinking about the next thing that has to get done.
Well said. Eckhart Tolle, the power of now, right? Sit in the now, see what you can get done. And then, sometimes just taking a little break from it just rejuvenates the creative thinking and gives you something even more powerful than what you thought. And I love that because we're always striving for perfection and to get things done and on our own, like, if I don't do this, am I worthy? And as humans, we're just perfectly imperfect, aren't we? So if we give ourselves the space and grace and the permission, I always like to use that word, the permission to expand, it will happen naturally and organically. It doesn't have to be fought and pushed, a little bit more flow in life, just like when you're gardening, right? You plant your seeds, you pull out your roots, but you give it time for the sun and the rain and the grains to be nourished, and then you have something beautiful at the end. So thank you. Amanda, this has been so wonderful. Really, I'm so grateful for your time. I'm glad that I got to know you a little bit better. I hope if you're ever in Canada, you'll come visit me. I promise we have great sidewalks. And if not, I'm in the States all the time. So I will maybe give you a ding and we can talk more about how we as data divas can go make the world a bit of a better place for all those ladies and men out there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure, and I will definitely be looking you up when next time I'm in Canada.
That's amazing. Well, thank you all for listening to another Women's Spotlight. As you know, we bring you these spotlight sessions just so you can be inspired by the amazing women in your community. And so that if you're ever feeling like you want to try something new, or you're ever feeling that something's bogging you down, these women can give you inspiration that together we can make a difference out there, whether you're in data or not, and we can band together. So please tune in next time. But for today, let's express our eternal gratitude for Amanda for sharing her stories, her wisdom, and making us all just a little smarter and a little happier after this great discussion. Take care, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe and follow me. And also, if you want some other content, hit me up on Myshrall Speaks on Instagram, or join my inner circle at taramyshrall.com. You will be the first to receive new content when it drops, as well as the first to get the Women's Spotlight. Learn about other amazing women in our local community that are up to big things. Thanks again, with love and light. Until next time, guys.